Hey, good morning, everyone. You are listening to Ultra Life Today. We're here at the Ultra Botanica Studios here in Oklahoma City. I'm sitting with Adam Payne, the CEO of Ultra Botanica. I'm Josh Bell, your Chief Product Evangelist. And we have a very special guest today. His name is Dr. Bryan Frank, and he has a practice out in Edmond, Oklahoma called Regenesis Health. And I'm just going to briefly mention a couple of things about Bryan. One would be that this gentleman he's been an anesthesiologist. He's board certified in integrative pain management. He's board certified in medical acupuncture, regenerative medicine. I was asking him before the broadcast, and it's like, I just can't remember all those initials, Bryan, because there's way too many of them. But welcome to the show, Bryan. It's good to have you.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Oh, and one thing that I did not mention is Bryan happens to be the chief medical officer for Ultra Botanica, and that came about in an interesting way. Adam,
that's a long.
you want to throw a little origin in here because
history.
It's kind of cool.
Well, I mean, Bryan, I love the story that God weaves through our lives. First of all, I appreciate you coming in today. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you have a really busy schedule with your own clinic and with your grandkids and your wife, and it's summertime, right?
Great grandkids.
Great grandkids. Oh my gosh. Great grandkids?
Of course they are.
Three. Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow. We met in 2012 after I come back on a missions trip to from Sierra Leone, where who's the pastor over at City Church?
Richard Hogue.
Richard Hogue. I met Richard in line at Belgian Air on the way back from Sierra Leone. In front of me, I was, we were done with this intense mission trip. The Lord had been with us in so many miraculous circumstances, actually. And there in line were these boisterous Americans in front of us.
Never boisterous.
And you can't mistake them. One of the guys had a University of Oklahoma shirt on, and we started chatting with them, and lo and behold, they were from Oklahoma City, and it was Richard Hogue and a team of guys that had just been preaching there. And, I've met a lot of different, super pastors, the big church pastors. Richard actually took me aside in a very gentle way. All the exterior varnish disappeared, and he said, okay, hey, Richard said, tell me about Adam. And he spent like an hour just connecting with me and and learning about me and what God was doing in my life. And at the end of that experience, he says, you need to meet Bryan Frank. I'm like, oh, okay, who's Bryan Frank? He's a medical doctor. He's been the head of our missions board at the church for a while. You guys would really click. And so when I got back, I reached out to Richard. Richard then connected me with Bryan. And Bryan, boy, did we connect.
Yeah, we did.
Do you remember those days?
Oh, yeah.
Well, tell us about it a little bit.
Well, we initially just got to meet each other and began to know each other. And at that time, you were involved in a different company that was making the Metaderm products.
That's right. We were making these products for diabetic foot ulcers and eczema and psoriasis and all that stuff. That's right.
Yeah, and from a product standpoint, that was great because I was able to get very quickly 3 patients off of corticosteroids with eczema problems.
Yeah.
But then as we continued our friendship, you had the thoughts for the work you were doing with curcumin and solubilize it, and then
that's right.
Yeah, a bunch of drunk horses. You had to figure out, okay, how do we get that alcohol?
What a good little side journey that was.
That was boy. So we developed. This is our out of the labs of B.G. Kurian and Hal Schofield. Have you met B.G. and Hal at any point in time?
Yeah, in the past.
In the past, okay. I think they've come to some of our boards or science meetings and stuff like that. BG was working on how to solubilize curcumin in order to get it to be more bioavailable in the body. And so he had driven it into a water matrix. John Chansey and I, who is the horse vet and my buddy, who was We had decided to make just an ethanol tincture of it, and we were dosing horses with this stuff. And it was getting into the horses, but it was also making the horses a little drunk. And a drunk horse isn't a happy horse. So John came to me in my office and said, look, man, the ethanol tincture is not going to work for horses. We need to do something different. And that's when I came up with the idea for UltraCur, the liquid protein scaffolding, because I was dropping the soluble curcumin on my finger. Some of you have heard this story before. And I was seeing how the curcumin was going into my finger and binding to all of the structures, and that wasn't going to wash off. And so I thought to myself, you know what, that's binding preferentially to all the protein structures in my skin. What if we use protein as a carrier to get the curcumin into the body? And we tried that. John was like, well, that's a great idea. Let's try to build it. He built our first batch in
The
his
official
kitchen.
cake baker.
Yep. Oven-baked batch. And it not only did it work, but it worked really, really well. That was back in 2013. In 2014, we started to manufacture this stuff in earnest. And Bryan, I think you literally took one of our first batches in May of 2014 to a medical conference that you were speaking at in Germany.
Yeah, that's correct. So for 3 years in a row, in fact, I was teaching at the it's a World Laser Medicine Conference. And
So let's help us understand that. What's a medical laser?
So medical lasers, laser light, of course, is what's called very coherent light. In other words, as to contrast that with a flashlight in a dark room, you would see the beam spread out.
Right.
But with laser light, it doesn't spread.
It's a concentrated wavelength of a very particular light source.
And then you can have lasers in red or blue or green or yellow, different colors based on the wavelength. But there are many applications for laser in medicine, and at this Congress...
Well, I was only familiar with, up to that point, the cutting kind. You want to cut and cauterize. But apparently laser light can do a whole bunch of things to a cell.
Yeah, this group of international docs that were at the conferences had two applications primarily. One would be from a medical acupuncture standpoint. You can treat acupuncture points with laser.
Oh, instead of a needle?
Without needles. So,
That's cool.
In fact, Dr. Weber, that developed the equipment that I use, calls it needles of light.
Nice.
Yeah.
So do you think it energetically does better than a needle in some cases, or?
Yeah, certainly at least as good and perhaps better.
Because I know you were the head of the American Academy of Acupuncture for
medical acupuncture, right?
Right, for a while.
Yeah, I was president for 2 years. I was on the board for 10 years. I was fortunate in the way I came into the international community was that the International Council of Medical Acupuncture and Related Therapies asked me, as president of the American Academy of Medical Acupuncture, they asked me to serve on the board for the International Council.
Oh, wow.
And so I did that, and then a couple of years after my tenure as president of the American Academy, I was president for 2 years of the International Council on Medical Acupuncture. And we would have congresses all over the world, literally once each year. Europe, Asia, South America, North America. And at each of those conferences, of course, I was on the board, I was president, vice president during different terms, and then I would be teaching, largely on medical acupuncture. But then the second so you can use...
So hold on a second here. So
I'm just getting fascinated by wanting to ask some questions here.
So I know, Josh, I see you kind of itching in your seat here. What's the difference between traditional acupuncture and medical acupuncture? Is it the same thing, just with a different name, or is it something different?
Well, some would say it's the same. However, for medical acupuncture, that's a designation for people that are licensed as medical doctors.
Oh, interesting.
And then they train and incorporate acupuncture into their practice, whether that's family medicine, orthopedics, internal medicine, in my case, for many years, anesthesiology, and then ultimately boarded in medical acupuncture and then regenerative medicine. So when we use the term medical acupuncture, that designates a person who is otherwise a licensed medical doctor, and they have brought acupuncture into their practice. So it really, we would say in the academy, it's the best of both worlds, the conventional and the alternative. You bring them together into an integrative model.
Oh, and so it's taking all of everything you know in functional medicine and also in integrative medicine, and it's adding all of that knowledge base to what acupuncture, how energetic medicine essentially
Right.
can affect the human body. So it's kind of like what DOs used to be kind of known for, which was they were kind of like chiropractors and doctors all at once, right?
Yeah.
Exactly, because they were manipulating the body and then prescribing medicines. So you do medicines, nutritionals, and acupuncture or energetic medicine. Do you call it energetic medicine or do you call it acupuncture? I mean, I'm calling it energetic medicine.
Acupuncture is one of a variety of energetic modalities, and so that would include acupuncture. That would include the laser, if you
Right.
use laser light instead of stainless steel needles. And we can also, as an anesthesia pain specialist, I can use lasers in a very anatomical medical model
Oh, interesting.
outside of the acupuncture framework. Then in addition to that, other energy therapies that we use at Regenesis Health would include pulse wave therapies, which is an acoustic wave.
Right, that's providing like energy to sclerotic or fibrous tissues, right?
That, and also people that have various pain problems, they often have overloaded muscles and trigger points and stuff. It helps to
Interesting.
break those. It helps to increase the microcirculation. And curiously, it also has a stem cell activation process to it.
I mean,
Wow.
there's so many. Go ahead, John.
Well, no, I was just going to say, well, Brian, who needs acupuncture? When you see a patient and they come in, is it like one of the things that immediately hits? It's like, this is in my toolbox, and I can really help you with this. What do you use it for?
Well, acupuncture among American physicians, the primary use is for pain-related problems. And originally coming out as an anesthesiologist and pain specialist, that was my original application, but my training was far more extensive, and I realized very, very early on in my practice that they may be coming to me with a shoulder problem that we treat with acupuncture, but they mention, oh man, my allergies are just really knocking me out this season. And I knew how to treat that.
Wow.
Or maybe it was asthma, or maybe it was gut-related issues or menstrual problems or something. And I realized that I had been trained in that. And so very, very early on in my medical acupuncture practice, I started treating not only pain problems, but these functional medical problems as well.
Well,
So before we're getting close to
we're
our
hitting-
break here.
yeah, we're hitting our
So,
break.
Dr. Frank, if people wanted to, you practice in Oklahoma City. You have actually
Yep.
Edmond,
Yep.
north of Oklahoma City. If people wanted to get a consultation with you, what number can they call to get in touch with you?
They can call 405-763-7603. They can do that anytime over the weekend or whatever.
Is there a website they can go to?
Yep, they can. The website is regenesishealth.com, but that is re-genesishealth.com.
Okay, re-genesishealth.com. Our mission is to take nature's most beloved botanicals and enhance them with our liquid protein scaffold technology. This helps it reach your cells faster and better. With exponentially enhanced bioavailability, you'll feel better every day. Ultra Botanica, the feel-good curcumin.
We are back. Ultra Life Today is the show you're listening to. We've got a fascinating guest. I've got Adam Payne on the far left. He's fascinating enough. But then we've got Dr. Bryan Frank right in the middle of us, so he can't go anywhere. And we're learning a lot today about things like energetic medicine and how you utilize lasers and pain management. And there's so much more that we're going to get into. So let's kick it right back up. You were telling us a little bit about who gets acupuncture or some of the other tools that you keep in your toolbox, Brian, and how you identify that and apply those things in your practice.
Yeah, so acupuncture was the first integrative alternative therapy that I was trained in, actually before I went to medical school.
Amazing.
So I've been involved in acupuncture for 50 years, amazingly.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's been an exciting part of my life. I've been president of the American as well as the International Councils on Medical Acupuncture. I've taught in 30 or 40 countries around the world, acupuncture and related topics. But that's just one of the tools I have. We use microcurrent. We use pulse wave therapies. We use laser. I do a very novel type of magnetic therapy called Biomagnetic Pear. And that's really...
Well, you were sharing something with us on the break,
Yeah.
and this is a pretty cool segue because our listeners don't know that you spend a great deal of time every year going into foreign countries and ministering to people. But you were telling me something that tied into biomagnetic pair theory. But tell us a few of the countries you go to and what you do there, Bryan.
Yeah, as a medical missionary, we have served in many countries throughout the last 30 years, but currently our emphasis is on Nepal, which is just north of India, between India and Tibet. And we go to Kenya in Africa, East Africa. And then I have very active work for over 30 years in Mexico. So those are our three countries of focus in the recent 5-6 years. But in addition to that, I've served in Haiti, I've served in the Dominican Republic, in Ecuador, in India, in Russia.
How many weeks a year do you traipse off and do this?
Well,
Before COVID, probably a lot more.
Yeah, before COVID, we would go our projects halfway around the world. So if we go to Nepal or Kenya, we'd be there usually 15 days. And
Wow.
And Mexico, by design, is a short project.
Okay.
I can get down there quickly. And but in each of these places where we serve, we have ongoing projects year-round with indigenous local people. So when we go, we certainly give it a big shot in the arm, so to speak. But we still have clinics and we still have ministries and stuff going in each of these countries, year-round.
Boots on the ground. That is so awesome. So tell this unique story about applying biomagnetic pair therapy, which is this really out-of-the-box therapy, at least in my mind, and what happened there on one of your mission trips.
Well, I ought to give a little introduction to that. This is a therapy that was started 35 years ago by a physician and surgeon in Mexico City named Dr. American gringos would say Isaac Goyce, so Dr.
Okay.
Isaac Goyce.
Okay.
And Dr. Goyce was a physician and surgeon, and he had actually been attending a lecture from an American physician to the astronauts. And
To the
That's
astronauts.
impressive.
Okay.
That's really impressive.
And that doctor's name was Dr. Richard Broringmeyer. And in this presentation, he noted that when the astronauts splashed down in the sea and they were brought back up to the aircraft carrier,
Right.
of course, he was doing their post-flight physicals.
Sure.
Now, Dr. Broringmeyer was very, very observant, maybe more than some conventional doctors.
Okay.
And he would notice that virtually every astronaut would be walking towards the clinic with a very, very slight limp. And so when he got them into the clinic, he examined them and found that invariably their right leg was, perhaps about an inch shorter than the left. And his theory was that they had been out of the Earth's geomagnetic field, and so that had shifted them somehow. So Dr. Broingmeyer literally took a magnet somewhere between the hip and the lower leg and until the leg just instantly became equal with the other one.
Wow.
And so he would take, this was years ago, he would take, that old white athletic tape and tape that onto their thigh for, a week or so. He really probably didn't need to do it, but for 30 minutes. But anyway, so Dr. Goyce had attended that lecture.
And this is fascinating.
It's
and
just so
over
cool.
the next couple of weeks, it wasn't long, but over the next couple of weeks, Dr. Goyce thought, okay, most of us don't go into space. But his theory was, and before he was a medical doctor, he was a physical therapist. So he was a
interesting.
hands-on therapist, And so his theory is that when we have trauma or when we have sickness, we know scientifically, medically, that all of our cells have a polarity.
Right.
All of our organs have a polarity, and our body as a whole has a polarity.
Right.
And so his theory was that when we have trauma or when we have sickness, that there should be a way to identify organs and tissues that are out of proper polarity. And so he was familiar with a type of testing we do called muscle testing or energy testing.
Okay.
The formal term for that is called applied kinesiology. Right. And usually that's done in chiropractor or naturopathic clinic or offbeat medical doctors like me,
Right.
And we'll have a patient hold out their arm, and we'll challenge them with a supplement or a pharmaceutical or whatever it is.
Right.
And we'll push down on their arm, and they're strong at first if they receive information that is in harmony. But if you give them information or a product or something that creates interference, then immediately the arm will go weak.
Wow.
So Dr. Goyce thought he wanted to go head to toe, and search out all the organs and tissues he could think of. And so when I scan patients like that, then I'm scanning roughly 250 different organs or tissues. And if you did that pushing your arm in,
That's
would
a
take
lot of
about
time.
10 hours.
well,
Be an expensive appointment.
yeah, and it'd be tiring.
Right.
Yeah.
So with this background to go into the Space Doctor's lecture, Dr. Goyce realized that if you gave information to the body that was in harmony, the legs would be equal length. But just like Dr. Broingmeyer had seen when they were stressed that right leg shortened.
So he would test the length of the legs while he
Yes.
was doing that. Oh, very
Now,
interesting.
initially what he did is he would have his assistant in the clinic take a magnet and as he called out different anatomical structures, his assistant would put the magnet on different parts of the head and then the neck and so forth. And then the first patient he ever had was a young man named Antonio. And so as he was calling out these different structures, when his assistant put the magnet over the thymus, which is an important immune gland under the sternum, the breastbone, instantly Antonio's right leg became about an inch shorter.
What?
That would be the same as if his arm, got weak.
Come on.
And so Dr. Goyce told Antonio, said, this is just all theory, so we're just going to leave that one there. And then they took another magnet in
the different polarity.
Yeah,
Okay.
the opposite polarity. And he started calling out all the anatomical structures again. And when he got right down in the lower sacrum, instantly Antonio's legs became equal.
Okay, so he was providing a feedback loop of, okay, here's energy that's causing a disbalance, and then he found the opposite pair that brought it into balance.
Yeah, brought it into harmony.
Oh, that's why you call it magnetic pair therapy.
It's always in pairs.
Yeah,
I-
PAIR,
not-
not the fruit, people.
Yeah, not watermelon therapy.
PAIR.
Yeah,
Though some of us would prefer magnetic watermelon therapy.
So what he did with this patient is he just was guessing. So they left the magnets on for about a half an hour or so. Well, what I haven't told you yet is that the reason he was seeing Antonio was because this was in the 80s and Antonio had AIDS.
Oh.
And that was a real scary thing in the 80s.
Oh, wow.
And with this treatment, and he either had only one or two treatments, and within days Antonio was feeling well, and within weeks he was well.
Oh, my gosh.
And in fact, here 35 years later, Antonio actually lives in American, practices this therapy, and does not have AIDS.
What a great story.
So
what a
it's-
great story.
Yeah, and most medical people would listen to that and say, "Oh, that is just a crock,"
Yeah, they
But,
have to. They have to, because there's nothing in the scientific thinking that would justify that, except if you really went into the nitty gritty of what Dr. Goyce did. I mean, he didn't have any idea what he was. He was observing a phenomenon, right? And he was like, "Well, that's interesting. I wonder what happens when we apply the other one to the other side and create the harmonic signal." So this whole thing of biomagnetic pairs, Doc, has it become its own kind of school of medicine or fellowship, or what's the status of it?
So internationally, it is taught largely to physicians.
Okay.
And because Dr. Goyce was Hispanic, this is actually a curriculum in the medical school, in several medical schools in Mexico, Ecuador,
That is so
Oh, wow.
cool.
Argentina, Madrid, Spain, places like that. And so with him being a physician and Hispanic, then in the Latin American and Spain communities, most of the people that learn the therapy are physicians. In the U.S., it's been an interesting, different course. In the U.S.,
Is it mostly integrative physicians, or is it DOs, or is
yeah, no, I mean it would attract the same type of physician that, say, would be interested in acupuncture or something.
that
like
makes sense?
Yeah, and so in the U.S. over the last 20 years, especially, the training has been offered just completely available to whoever wants to come. And so what commonly happens is that people that are, they have family or friends that have been treated with biomagnetic Pear and done well. And so they say, gee, I want to learn that. And they may be, for instance, in my initial class, about 120 people, I was the only medical doctor.
Oh, wow.
We had probably half a
Interesting.
dozen chiropractors. We had probably a dozen or two nurses. We had a whole lot of licensed, registered acupuncturists. We had some massage therapists. And then we had a number of people that were just lay people that wanted to learn it. And so it is growing around the U.S., but there's very few of us certainly.
It's kind
in
of
Oklahoma.
I don't think. Have you seen any downside or negative side to biomagnetic Pear therapy?
No, I haven't seen any downside, and in fact, what I've told for being a medical acupuncturist and being involved in that field for 50 years,
Yep.
it's curious that now, when people know that I do acupuncture and they come and we have the first consultation to go over their history and whatnot, I let them know that most of the time, not always, but most of the time, I can probably address it more comprehensively with biomagnetic
With the magnetic pairs,
Yeah.
that makes so much sense.
You know, with acupuncture, we do a lot of real good with musculoskeletal health, pain problems. As I mentioned before, it might be asthma, it might be gut-related issues, might be menstrual problems, migraines. And so I have a lot of experience with that. But the one thing I can't do really effectively with acupuncture that I can with biomagnetic Pear is we can address AIDS. We can address malaria like we see in Nepal. We can, or Kenya rather. We can address typhoid.
So these are immune-based, viral, bacterial, fungal, parasitic issues that are fed perhaps by these out of balance magnetic issues in the body. Mm-hmm. And obviously we don't know much really what's going on there, but you've been seeing results.
Oh yeah. It's been highly effective for a wide variety of problems.
Now, malaria is kind of the really kind of the bread and butter of this thing. I mean, you can't fake a bad malaria.
Yeah. That and typhoid, and we've done clinical research on both of those at our work in Kenya, and in Kenya we actually did a trial. I published it in peer-reviewed literature where we took 13 people with laboratory documented and clinically documented typhoid fever.
Wow.
Treated them with nothing but magnets, and 2 days later, all 13 were clinically well, and 11 of the 13, their lab tested reverted to normal.
That's astonishing. Yeah. We're going to have to go to break here, Josh.
We are. This is Ultra Life Today. We're sitting here having such a fascinating conversation with Bryan Frank. We'll actually probably have to keep him here a few hours, but he won't let us.
Right.
Anyway, but Adam Payne's on the end.
This is our second segment. So Bryan will be back next week with us, and we'll be. And you can stay tuned for. Us live here in the studios.
Absolutely.
This is
the show.
This is Ultra Life Today.